Hello and welcome to our live broadcast event coming to you from the Money Museum at the Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago. I'm standing here next to $1 million in cash, and today we're going to talk about money and how to move it faster. My name is Sean Rodriguez, your host for today's broadcast. Over the past couple of years, I've been honored to serve as the Federal Reserve's Faster Payments Strategy Leader and Chair of the Fed-sponsored Faster Payments Task Force. I'm here with several of my payments industry colleagues to talk to you about the coming transformation of our nation's payment system. You'll hear from these newly minted Faster Masters via live panel discussions on today's program, as well as through taped interviews that will be played over the next 30 minutes. Now, as you know, businesses and consumers are all beginning to demand faster, smarter payments anytime, anywhere, and to anyone. Over the next half hour, we'll lay out the Faster Payments Task Force's findings, showcase what it will take to develop a payment system of the future, and describe what this means for consumers and businesses across the country. Now, today marks the release of the Faster Payment Task Force's final report, The U.S. Path to Faster Payments, a call to action. I invite you to read and share the report with others, which is now available at fasterpaymentstaskforce.org. We believe the task force work complements recent and emerging payments innovations in our country, and that this work will help set the stage for additional industry action to achieve the vision of a faster, ubiquitous, broadly inclusive, safe, and efficient payment system in the U.S. by 2020. Did I say 2020? Only 3 years from now? I sure did, echoing the 320 payments industry stakeholders that served on the task force. These members represent an unprecedented mix of financial institutions, businesses, consumer advocacy groups, government agencies, fintech firms, and many, many others. In the report, the task force lays out an ambitious near-term vision for the U.S. payment system, as well as outlining 10 recommendations for specific activities to support the goal. The goal is a shiny new payment system that will deliver broad benefits to American consumers and businesses by delivering real-time, data-rich payments. The report also includes a treasure trove of ideas for implementing faster payment capabilities. In the report, you'll find expert assessments of 16 end-to-end faster payment solution proposals. Rich dialogue between task force members and solution providers was key to enhancing these proposals. By design, the task force did not pick a winner or a best solution. We're going to leave that for the marketplace to decide. This same dialogue informed the final phase of task force work, which included development of the vision, goals, and recommendations that appear in the final report. Now, I don't want to steal all the thunder from my payments colleagues, so during the course of this broadcast, you'll hear greater detail from them concerning the task force vision, goals, recommendations, and proposal assessment process. So with that, here's a video that sets the stage for our panel conversation, and I'll be back with you in a minute.
Faster payments in the United States are very different than faster payments elsewhere in the world. There are thousands of financial institutions, there's no regulatory mandate, and there's just a lot of complexity and differing opinions.
The things we're hearing today are people are confused by our current payment system. Some payments get there in 2 days, some get there 1 day, 3 days. It's very confusing when they look at the fact they can send a text to a friend with a big file attached. They're like, why can't I send my money immediately as well?
One of the things I think really makes the U.S. market interesting from a faster payments perspective is just how diverse and robust the landscape is, and that has historically accommodated a lot of really great opportunities. But when it comes to trying something new, it can be a journey, it can be a process.
I think the thing that made this journey unique is the public-private sector partnership that we've developed since day one. Early on in the process, there were many people that asked the Federal Reserve to step up in a collaboration and leadership role, and to their credit, they did that. And we've constructed this task force and this dialogue over several years now. So that public-private sector partnership and the collaboration that has resulted from those extensive discussions over many, many years has made this a unique process.
The journey to faster payments has been so unusual in that it's brought so many different stakeholders to the table, and it's really fantastic to have the consumer interest represented along this process. So to be able to raise concerns about folks that are otherwise left out of the traditional banking system and may have different access to payments has been really fantastic.
So we've been at this for 2 years. We did a lot of foundational work to understand where the U.S. was in the payments environment vis-a-vis other markets. We worked very hard at creating effectiveness criteria, what we think are aspirational attributes that we want to see in a faster payments environment in the United States. We invited the fintech community to submit proposals. We reviewed, assessed those proposals. Based upon all of that work, we looked at what the next step should be in the U.S., and that's where the foundation is for the recommendations.
The final report's really a call to action. It says what's wrong with our payment system today. It says we need to work together in order to improve it, and it shows in the end that we can make payments faster and people will understand why money moves the way it moves today.
I think that this is going to enable money to move in new, faster, more innovative ways, which will ultimately create new business cases and new product opportunities and service opportunities that weren't viable the way money moved in the past.
We're going to see at least 2, maybe 4 faster payment systems implemented this year, and without the task force, I don't think you'd have seen that.
Yeah, I think this is transformational for the banking industry and for payments in general because we will get to what people expect. They will click on a button, the money will get there, and the receiver will have it right away. It's really pretty simple, but it's been very complex up until now.
Welcome back to the set here at the Money Museum at the Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago. I'm now joined by 3 of my esteemed colleagues that worked on the task force, and we're going to talk a little bit about the task force process, how it got stood up, and what the purpose of it all was. And I'm thrilled to have Jim Reuter here to my left, who's the CEO of First Banks of Colorado. You just saw him on the video. Christina Tetrial from Consumer Union. She also had a spot on the video. And then Bradley Wilkes, who's a fintech CEO for WingCash. So, folks, thanks for joining us on the set here today. And I want to start with you, maybe, Christina, with some questions about the current payment system. You know, what is the impact of the current payment system on consumers?
Sure. So the current payment system, unfortunately, can be slow and it can be opaque for consumers. And that can lead to consumer confusion and uncertainty. So for example, if I were to pay a bill today, those funds might not be applied until Tuesday, of next week. That can lead to a late payment or some other money misstep that can be costly for consumers. In terms of being opaque, that applies, an example of the opacity of the current system is if I'm going to receive a payment, I don't necessarily know when I'm going to be able to use that money. So if I were to receive payment for a service that I had rendered today, I may not be able to use that money until the end of next week. And that can lead to a reliance on short-term credit or other expensive payments.
Mm-hmm. Right. What we're also seeing, though, as a part of this improvement and some of the gaps that fintech companies will fill as they address these issues is greater control for consumers. So in the future, as we look to improvement in the payment system, we'll see improved control for consumers.
Along those same lines, as a banker, one of the things I hear from customers is, why is it so hard to move money to another person? They have a phone in their hand, they can attach a picture, send it to a friend in Berlin, and it gets there right away. They're wondering, why can't I move money that easily as well?
So let's talk a little bit about the task force formation and how it came together. And maybe, Jim, I can lean on you to talk a little bit about what this whole process is about and how the group got together.
Yeah, so between 2013 and 2015, the Fed, with input from the private and public sector, did an assessment of our current payment system and said, you know what, this is not kept up with the advances in technology. So in early 2015, the Fed put out a call for volunteers, and much to everybody's amazement, over 300 people came forward. And the makeup of that group was very diverse. You had financial institutions, regulators, consumer groups, businesses, retailers, standards bodies, and What's been amazing is for the last 2 years, this group has come together, each with their own perspectives and issues that they wanted to make sure were addressed by a new payment system, reached across the aisle, and produced the final report, the call to action on how we're going to move forward. And I'd be remiss in not complimenting the Fed team that made that happen, because I got to tell you, when I showed up at the first meeting and saw 300 people, I'm like, there's no way this is going to work. But they made it happen.
So the other important thing that he brought up is the volunteer effort. So we're all about the money, but this was a volunteer effort. The solution proposers that came forth, they were not compensated by the Fed or the task force for their work in bringing forth solution proposals. So very tremendous effort on the part of everybody engaged in this.
Excellent point. So, of course, we have the report now that we've issued. Bradley, some of the key findings, what would you point to from your perspective of the report?
Incredible work done, incredible report. The golden nuggets in there are obviously the recommendations. Also the solution proposals that were presented, over 33,000 pages of work and assessments by the QIAT. Some of the recommendations that are important is the formation of a work group to put together a governance framework. Obviously, we're addressing cross-border, which is significant and important for us as a U.S. economy. We send over $120 billion a year annually to other countries. And so we're addressing that by saying, hey, we want the faster payment system to also be able to address those kinds of transactions as well. We're also looking at emerging technologies. So we're going to see some things like distributed ledgers and digital currencies, and those are going to have an impact on these new designs of faster payment systems.
So, yeah, sure.
Sorry, so one thing I would add is the effectiveness criteria that the task force developed, and that's the standards or the blueprints by which proposals were evaluated. And they really provide a great guide for how to build a safe, ubiquitous, and efficient payment system. And I think that's a tremendous resource both for the task force, but it's also an output that can guide industry and providers moving forward and really show how to bake in the consumer protections that are really important.
So Bradley talked about the proposals, and sounds like an awful lot of material that was reviewed. Christina, how did 320 people sift through all of this great new thinking and manage that process?
So in order to ensure an objective and independent assessment, the task force decided to hire a qualified independent assessment team to do that evaluation against the effectiveness criteria. And over the course of many months and with dialogue with the proposers, those evaluations were done and completed. And really, I think the proof will be in the pudding when people look over the results in the paper.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to stick with you,
okay,
because you're kind of representing the end users here, both consumers and businesses. But what does it really mean, these potential benefits to consumers and benefits with this new payment alternative?
I think all end users will enjoy a safer, faster, and more transparent payment system when these recommendations are implemented. And so an example of what what speed means for consumers and businesses is that it can mean increased working capital. So if I work today and I earn funds, I can spend that at the grocery store and put food on the table. That may mean a decreased reliance on expensive credit. In terms of transparency, I have a greater understanding of where my money is and when, and that really is about better money management. It's about not incurring those late fees and other money missteps that can happen.
There's been one thing, often we hear the word faster payments and think it's all about faster. It's actually about shorthand. That's shorthand for, hey, the systemic improvement that's coming, this new payment capability that will be a part of our nation's economic fabric.
So, to expand on it, give you an example of what Christina was talking about in terms of a small business. Plumber comes to your house, does some work. Today, he or she leaves, creates an invoice, sends it to you. You turn around, mail back a check, or set it up on bill pay. I see a day where they'll be able to electronically deliver you an invoice right there. You'll get it on your electronic device, pay it, and the transaction's done. Plumber has the money and quick availability to their funds.
Excellent example. That's great. So one of the things I want to pull out here is this term ubiquity. And Jim, I'll stick with you if I can. Not an easy term to wrestle with, but we've wrestled with that for the last couple of years. What does ubiquity mean, and why is it important in this whole dialogue about a new, faster payment system?
Yeah, ubiquity is a word none of us use, and now we say it all the time, so it's kind of interesting. But in its simplest form, it means I can pay anyone, and the experience is very user-friendly. And that's not how our payment system works today. So if I wanted to send you money today with a person-to-person service, I would have to ask you what network you're part of, what app you're using, and it should just be easier than that. A good example I give is, if I want to make a cell phone call to you, I say, what's your cell phone number? I don't ask you, who's your carrier, what device do you have? I call the number and the call goes through. And if we deliver on the 10 recommendations that are in the final report, that's the outcome we'll have for our customers.
Super. So you folks have talked a bit about the effectiveness criteria. We have a video coming up to kind of bring some of that more to life on top of your comments. But thanks for the conversation on setting up the task force. Let's turn to the video now, and we'll get a little more insight on the effectiveness criteria.
How do you maintain stability, yet drive innovation in the world's largest economy? For the Federal Reserve, part of the solution is creating a better payment system. With the help of a diverse range of stakeholders, including the broader payments community, the Faster Payments Task Force developed 6 categories of criteria for effective solutions. Ubiquity, to ensure payments can be sent and received by any consumer or business. Efficiency. Efficiency is achieved in an environment that's competitive, innovative, and adaptable. Safety and security, to boost trust in the system, minimize fraud, resolve errors quickly, and protect all assets and information. Speed, to provide complete access to funds and visibility of transactions in near real time. Legal, an effective system complies with the rules and laws designed to define obligations of all parties and protect consumers and data. Governance, to effectively and inclusively support transparent processes that serve the public interest. Achieving the payment system envisioned by these criteria is aspirational, but can be achieved through a combination of private sector innovation and industry collaboration. Stakeholders can engage by building the infrastructure needed to reach all users, establishing rules and governance that serve all interests, and anticipating future needs and evolving the ecosystem to ensure safety and sustainability. By meeting the challenge, we can implement a faster, more inclusive, and secure payment system in the United States. Learn more about the U.S. path to faster payments at fasterpaymentstaskforce.org.
Okay, we're back here at the Money Museum at the Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago. I'm joined now with a new set of panelists, and to my left here is Jan Estep. She's the CEO of Nacha. To her left is Tom Ray. He's the Senior Executive of our Payment Strategy at U.S. Bank. And then to his left one more time is Steve Ledford, who's leading the real-time payment system development effort for the Clearinghouse. So thanks for joining me on the panel discussion today, you three. What we talked about in the last panel was more about how the task force was set up and the effectiveness criteria and all of that. But I'd really like to focus on, with you three, is what next? You know, we laid out some recommendations, vision, goals, all of that. So I want to focus our discussion on what's going to happen now that we've issued our final report today and what's going to ensue. So if I could, Tom, I'd like to start with you. And give us your sense for how these findings will impact payments in the U.S. moving forward.
Great. Thanks, Sean. I think the final report has a great amount of information in it. And I think there's 2 or 3 great examples. So if you look at the effectiveness criteria, as the previous panel mentioned, there's a lot of requirements in there, specifications in there, and the fintechs have been able to use that. In fact, many use them to put it in their proposals. But I think the financial institutions have an opportunity to utilize that document and rationalize their business strategy around faster payments. Mm-hmm. I think a second example would be the recommendations. There's many great recommendations coming out of the task force, but some of those sort of relate around the interoperability. Mm-hmm. In this country, we're going to have multiple service providers, and in order to move a transaction through multiple service providers, we're going to need that kind of collaboration between those organizations. I mean, the consumer expects when they initiate a payment that it be seamless it would be safe and secure, it would be transparent, and of course it would be fast. And so we need to have that interoperability, so every transaction will move that way. And finally, I think that the call for action that comes out of the task force paper is maybe even the most important. And the key component of that, obviously, is the whole market awareness. I mean, there's millions of folks that we need to make this network successful, and many of those need to understand the benefits of faster payment and how it relates to their personal lives. So I think a lot of great work has come out of that Faster Payments final report.
Super. So, Steve, if I could turn to you. We talked in the previous panel, and Tom talked a little bit about it in terms of the proposals. 16 proposals in the report, I think 3,100 pages of material and assessments and all of that. What did some of the proposals entail? If you give us a flavor for that.
Absolutely. The first thing I'd like to point out is that I think the approach we went through shows the wisdom of not trying to enforce a top-down solution. If you look in many other countries, someone, whether it was a governmental entity, central bank, said this is what we're going to do, and was fairly prescriptive. What we did here instead was say, here are our criteria. And by the way, the criteria really gave a lot of guidance to those who are proposing solutions on what the country wants, not just what the financial institutions, not just what the Fed wants, but what the country wants. I think it drew out a lot of ingenuity. We saw completely new and different ways of moving money being proposed, the clearing and the settlement of transactions. We also saw entirely new ways of thinking about money. What is money? Security, very important. A lot of the proposals dealt at great depth with ways of making sure that payments are safe and secure. And there were a lot of really good ideas about how to make it easy to send money, very much the way that Jim Rorty was talking about on the earlier panel. The final thing, the fact that there are 16 proposals, and by the way, there are others out there in the industry who are also using these criteria, as Tom mentioned, to come up with really good ideas around payments. It illustrates the fact nobody's going to be able to do this alone. It's going to take all of us working together to bring faster payments to the United States.
You know, the robustness of the proposals that you mentioned, Steve, is, I think, also very representative of the fact that end users have a lot of different needs, right? So if you're a consumer, you're sending it to, your neighbor, or if you're a small business or a corporate, there's subtleties in each one of those payments that require different support structures, and I think the robustness of the proposal showed that there are different ways to meet those varying needs, too.
Absolutely.
So if I could stick with you, Jan, because we've talked about some recommendations. Tom mentioned that. Bring those to life for us a bit in terms of what's actually in those recommendations and what's next.
Yeah, the recommendations themselves were very thoughtful on behalf of the task force, and I think we need to remember that the report itself was a result of many different organizations coming together over the last couple of years. So when we think about what's in the future and how to attack those recommendations, this collaborative process really will continue into the future. I think it's important to understand the report within that light. So for example, there is an interim collaborative work group that has already been formed by the task force, and its constituency are individuals from each one of the different segments that were in the task force. So again, a very diverse group. And when we reflect upon that, for example, I'm in an organization that prepares rules and standards for a variety of payment types, and we understand that inclusiveness in that process, hearing different voices along the way, are very important. And the task force recognized that as some of the recommendations were put in place. So as we think about interoperability that Tom mentioned, there will be a work group thinking about how to best reach that interoperability between solutions. There'll be another work group focused on security and making sure that when diverse parties are coming together technologically, that there is perhaps a minimum security standard that can give that confidence to everyone using the system. So it clearly will be a market-driven approach, much better than having kind of a prescriptive or strict regulation that isn't as flexible over time. We'll be able to be flexible with technology, with changes to the environment and changes with user needs, and I think that'll be important for the future.
I kind of look at this interim collaboration work group and these other work groups you talked about as kind of the baton handing off from the task force to real work that needs to continue to drive us to those desired outcomes. So great,
Absolutely.
thank you. So, Steve, if you could make this real for businesses and other stakeholders and banks and other financial services providers, how do they get involved and what do they need to do?
Well, first of all, I like the baton has been passed and we now need to do something with all the really good work that's been done. First, we need to realize this is a big deal. I mean, this is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to create an entirely new payment system and do it deliberately based on new ways of looking at how we want to move money and new ways of making it convenient and useful. So it's going to call on all of us. It's going to call on financial institutions, banks and credit unions. It's going to call on payment service providers to come up with and bring to market those innovative products and services so folks can actually use this payment system. It's going to call on those who are building the infrastructure to work together to make it something that can achieve the ubiquity that's so important in the report and make it work and make it work well. It's going to call on those who are in the organizations that represent and educate consumers, business users, various folks. It's going to call on the press to really do a really good job of educating people on what this new payment system is, how it's different, and how to use it and use it well. It's going to call on businesses to take a good hard look at their own way of doing things in their operations and see how can I make it better using these new tools. And very importantly, I think Jim on the first panel said that folks expect more now. I think from a consumer point of view, they have an important job and is to keep expecting more. And that's going to draw forth the type of solutions that will really make this successful.
Super. So, Jan, you know, we've got the recommendations, we've got vision, goals. What does success look like to you? And I'll ask the other question to the others, but tell us a bit about that.
You know, the report started off by saying we want a faster, ubiquitous, efficient, safe system. And the question is, what does that really mean in the end? And I think it will perhaps be more of a qualitative assessment of success versus quantitative as we move into the future. And certainly part of it will be evaluating the path. Have we been inclusive? Have we been responsive to needs? But clearly, the ability to make a payment to anyone, as Jim talked about earlier, will be success as it defines our new payment system. And we have the opportunity now here in the U.S. to kind of make it our own. The process can be our own, the solution can be our own, and success will be really if we meet the needs of our specific country. And that'll be great for the future of our payments ecosystem.
Yeah, my point of view of success is basically when I don't think about it anymore and I just start utilizing faster payments as opposed to another payment opportunity. And I think that's going to take us some time in this country to sort of migrate that way. But I think as the consumers go down that path, they'll eventually start just using faster payments as a normal course of business. Now, speaking of the business side, I think that's a little bit more difficult for them. There's a lot of work, as Steve said, for them to make some changes inside of their organizations. But I think they too will soon see the benefits of a faster payment transaction in certain cases. So I think we'll have some great success here in the near term.
Not long from now, everybody will be using it and nobody will think about it because it's just the way you do things.
Exactly.
Excellent. Thank you three for the discussion about what next. Very important to tee up the next work that comes along. So Jan, Tom, and Steve, we appreciate that. We also want to thank our other panelists today, and more importantly, or as importantly, we want to thank all of the task force members for their commitment to this important work over the past 2 years. Bradley mentioned earlier, this was a volunteer army that showed up for this, and all of you and your colleagues brought it home. So here we are now with the ask. We're asking your commitment. Today, we've made the case for action on the part of all payment stakeholders. We ask you to support this effort by taking the following actions. Embrace the vision and the effectiveness criteria that we've talked about today and that's documented in the report. Actively participate in the ongoing dialogue. And if possible, contribute to the work groups that Jan talked about and the recommendations for the follow-on work streams for the deliverables we're envisioning. And then most importantly, take the needed steps to make your own organization faster payments ready by 2020. For more information and to download the full task force report, please visit fasterpaymentstaskforce.org. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we look forward to working with you to build the payment system of the future.